Hi everyone, Jacob here with the Starlight Company. Now, I don't know about you, but I've been watching a lot of XP to level 3 lately, as I'd like to do, because I love Dungeons & Dragons content, and if you do too, you should consider subscribing. But recently, Jacob on that channel, different Jacob. If I say Jacob, I'm talking about him and not having some kind of existential crisis and talking about myself in the third person, just so you know. He's been doing videos talking about some of the worst D&D homebrew, and it's super reactionary and hilarious. I love watching it, but I realized there's this moment that could be used for teaching. Not necessarily for him, he knows more about Dungeons & Dragons than I do, I would say, but I know a lot, and I homebrew heavily in my games. Honestly, I use more homebrew than I do actual rules as written in my D&D games when I'm playing or when I'm DMing. I always make new spells, new items, enemies, everything, and I even mess with the planes constantly. I just like being able to work in my own ideas into the world, so I thought I could go through some of the so-called worst D&D homebrew and fix them, make them functional. Now I know, there are some of these homebrew ideas that are, totally jokes or whatever, never going to work. And I'll just kind of go through this. I haven't looked at these ahead of time. I just got onto dndbeyond into the homebrew section to spells and sorted by the, actually right now I'm sorting by the most highly rated. So let's flip the script, go to the worst rated, and let's just start going. I don't know how many I'm gonna do, but yeah, let's take a look. So honestly, I expected some of these to be a lot worse. Only -8? Did they get deleted? I don't know. Anyway, let's start off. Abberant Melody, which is the lowest rated spell. First level spell, casting time of 1 action, sight for Bard and Druid, only verbal components, instantaneous, enchantments, no attack or save, fine. You make blasphemous sounds with your instrument and the target flees on paper. So in horror, basically. Interesting idea. Basically giving a creature the frightened condition. There are other spells of first level that can cause fear, so I don't know why you wouldn't pick one of those, but if you're gonna pick this, right, like I said, I don't want to cast any of these out. I want to purely fix them. So if someone wanted a spell called Abberant Melody, let's see how that could work. So first off, Bard and Druid. You make sounds with your instrument, so instantly it has a material component to me, right? If you use something like an instrument, that is your material component. Whether or not you're using somatic components as you're casting, right, that kind of gets into some semantics. I would say verbal is interesting if you're making sounds with your instrument, right? Like if you have, for instance, a bard who plays a trumpet or a bugle or something, right? How are they going to make verbal components? I mean, they could start casting and then blow into their instrument, theoretically, but I don't know if using a verbal component would be totally necessary. If I was going to switch this around component-wise, I would say material component for sure, and maybe somatic component. Just in that you are casting something, right? Yeah, and so that you can't replace the material component with a spell focus, you could also make it an instrument, like a component that's like an instrument worth 10 gold pieces. Or maybe 25 gold pieces, right? Chromatic Orb is 50 gold pieces for a first level spell component, so I think that's totally valid, and then you would need that instrument instead of being able to use a focus. So, first level, I think that's fine. Basically, this spell is you grant the frightened condition to one foe. To make it different than other spells, I would say maybe you make this blasphemous sound and they have to flee instantly 15 feet. At first level, that's not insurmountable, but then that means that the target can't get any closer to you and can't attack you easily. No attack or save, I think that's an issue, so we're gonna say wisdom save on that one. As it is a blasphemous sound, wisdom being how well you can put up with the horrible sounds. So I think that honestly fixes a lot. Ooh, except I missed the range and area being sight. I think this needs to have a shorter distance, right? Maybe 100 feet, I would say. I mean, I was in marching band in school. I could hear an instrument just fine across a football field, which is 300 feet, basically 100 yards or meters, right? But I think capping this at 100 or 120 feet is plenty. But honestly, to make this balanced, maybe I'd say 60 feet. Let's say this has a range of 60 feet. I think that's great. So here above me, I've written out all of my new ideas for this spell. And you can take a look at that. Yeah, absolutely. So I'm also going to flip my horizontal because I realize I've been looking off screen this whole time. That's fine. So that's Abberant Melody. EdayrCrimson, I hope you like that. If you want to put that in your game, feel free. So, the next spell. This has a lot of words. Okay. Gotta psych myself up for this. Absolute Duplicate. First level. Casting time. Bonus action. Okay. Range, area, self. Okay. Components, visual, visual. Verbal and somatic. Duration until dispelled. That's interesting. School, divination, attack, save, none. Okay, so duration until dispelled. You don't see many spells with this duration. Like Symbol can have this, or different spells like that I can't think of. Simulacrum, right? So let's go through this spell. Okay. Oh, that was another thing. All right, I don't know if I said this well enough early in this episode, but I think that everyone, like, yeah, if you make spells that are poorly rated as jokes, then that's your own thing. But like, I don't want to be mean to these people who are just trying to homebrew, right? I want to use this as teaching moments to help show people the things that I consider while I'm homebrewing. So if you want to be a homebrewer, right, I support you. And I think that all you have to do is, you know, look at the spells, look at the feats, look at the classes that exist, and think how you can change things without making things overpowered or underpowered. And if you have questions about things being overpowered or underpowered, watch this video, watch the rest of it. But that's why I'm not just casting aside, and I don't want to like make fun of people's spelling or any of that stuff. That's low-hanging fruit in my eyes. So yeah, I hope you're enjoying this. I want to keep going. So, Absolute Twin. This spell can only be granted if you roll a 19 or higher in meditation. You are granted this spell or ability by a deity or a divine being. Okay. Once given this ability, you can create an exact replica depending on what you roll with a d5. If you roll a 1, you get damaged by the ability or spell. Roll a d10 for damage. If you roll a 2, you get a copy of yourself surrounded by your deity's flames. Okay. This entity does not have consciousness, so you will have to use the bonus action to control this entity. This entity has half of your current hit points and half of your current skills, and its AC is -3 from the original summoner's AC. Wait a second. Roll 2. Does not have a conscience. I'm just trying to make sure I'm like keeping up with this. If you roll a 3, you get a copy of yourself having patches of your deity's flames flowing through its body. This entity still does not have consciousness, so you have to use a bonus action to control this entity. This entity has half of your original hit points, half your skills. Its AC is -2 from the original summoner's AC. If you roll a 4, you get a copy of yourself without any visual flaws. This entity still does not have any consciousness, but you can now communicate with it telepathically. This entity has 3/4 of your original hit points and 3/4 of your skills. Its AC is -1 from the original summoner's AC. If you roll a 5, you get an exact copy of yourself. This entity has consciousness and seems to be able to understand the summoner's thought as they think of them. This entity has all of your original hit points and all of your skills, shares the original summoner's AC. Once the entity is unconscious or has 0 hit points is when the spell ends. The spell or ability can only be used once per day. So, that's a lot to think about. I think I have a lot of... I could talk about homebrew a lot. As someone who homebrews heavily and who wants to make source books out of his homebrew, I could talk about it for a long time. And a lot of people use homebrew to try to elevate their abilities, maybe try to be more powerful than the system warrants, but I still think you need to consider realism and where you'd be and levels of spells. So first off, I think if it's granted to you by a deity or a divine being, I don't think it should be a spell. I think that's more of a feature. I think that's a feature that's granted by a deity or divine being. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I reward players with that kind of stuff. As a player, I've been rewarded with that kind of stuff for completing tasks for deities or patrons. And I think that's how you get away with some of this stuff. The other thing with that is you don't get these kind of boons from deities or divine beings easily. This is something, this is magic on the level of Simulacrum, which is a level 7 spell, right? Yes, a level 7 spell. And that means you're level 13 by the time you can cast this, unless you have a scroll, but still. And there's a lot of components to Simulacrum. I mean, take a look. There's a lot. This being granted without needing all the material components puts it on an elevated level. Yes, there is risk associated with it, but the real risk is 1d10 of damage. So max you're going to get, and you can only use it once per day, so max damage you're going to get is 1d10. If you're going to penalize people for using features, I would say make the chances of penalty, or at least make the penalty equal to what happens when you succeed. Otherwise, they will just spam it and until they succeed. You know, it's like calling on your deity. Wow, I just blanked. When clerics call on their deity and they have to roll a d100, you know, and then level 20 clerics can just succeed and their deity helps them out. That is very overpowered. It's cool because the chances are so small. As you level, you know, level 20 clerics being able to succeed every time or once a week or whatever, that's its own thing. I'm not going to touch that. But for this spell, I still think it's a feature. How do we fix this feature? Well, it can still have range and area of self. I would say for something being granted by a deity or divine being, you know, like Simulacrum, that is an 8-hour cast time or 12-hour cast time, many hour cast time, and not needing any material components for this really should mean you need to cast this for a while, in my opinion, to make this balanced, right? Duration until it's dispelled, Simulacrum is like that, and rolling to determine what kind of abilities it gets, I think that's fine. Okay, if you want a way to get a Simulacrum, a copy, without needing an arcane caster in your party, I think that's totally fine and justified, especially if your deity messes with that kind of stuff. If you want to do that, so I will just mock up a feature up here. My ideas instantly, again, aren't to define a class that it's limited by. Right. The other thing that I noticed while reading it, you can't quantify skills very well, right? Or you can quantify, but you can't. How do you pick and choose which half of skills? So giving the entity, like scaling their hit points and scaling their AC, I think that's totally fine. Scaling their consciousness, that's tough. I think scaling its strength is one thing. Scaling its stats, you know? Like you could maybe, instead of just you know, stopping at AC, say AC, strength, wisdom, intelligence, charisma are 3 lowered. Or you could have this copy, this absolute duplicate. You could have them, you know, have flat stats for some of them. Like wisdom and intelligence of this are always 8, so they can't do some things. I think that's limiting, but that's one way you could do it. So anyway, here's a feature up here that I will homebrew and show you. I think that it works very well. You could absolutely put this in your game, but I think that it should only be done at higher levels, like level 13 or above. When duplication magic is available through Simulacrum or Clone's level 8 spell, but still, that is when you should be able to get this kind of boon from a deity. You also have to keep in mind, yeah, how deities work in Dungeons and Dragons, but if deities wantonly bestow upon all of your players gifts, go for it. You just have to make sure the other gifts are as balanced to this. You know, I think this is a good way to handle it, but again, not necessarily a spell. So that was a big ass tangent about that. Let's talk about Absolute Shield. People really like absolutes. Also, I'm not reading down. Keep that in mind. I'm not reading down. I haven't read these before, so you're just getting my absolute word vomiting. So 419 views. That's crazy. It was made almost 2 years ago. Nice. 5 comments on this. I'm not gonna read the comment. I won't read them in the video, but it's pretty funny. So, 9th level spell, instantly different. There's also a lot of like 9th level and 1st level / cantrip spells. People really like either making you super powerful in the beginning of the game or giving you new 9th level spells. I think that's great. 9th level spells are strange, and how they're balanced isn't exactly fantastic. So, you know, adding more 9th level spells or changing existing ones, I think is good. So anyway, casting time of 5 minutes. Okay, that's interesting. Range 30 feet in area. So you're not going to cast this in combat. Components, a material component and verbal component, with the material being 1 10 platinum gem. Focus. So you need a gem as a focus. I think Flaming Druid just means you use this gem to cast the spell. And I don't think it's used up. No, it's not. Okay, duration is 5 rounds. I'll talk about that in a second. School, conjuration, attack, save, none. Okay. You speak a word of power. I'm a sucker for words of power. Although if you're gonna speak a word of power, in my opinion, the spell should be power word shield or something. And summon a hollow sphere of a material of your choice. The sphere has 500 HP. The gem is the center of the sphere. The sphere does not break or shatter until either dispelled or loses all of its HP. Interesting. Okay, so a defensive 9th level spell. I could see this being very useful. The thing with 9th level spells is you don't want to waste them, right? Every spell, every full caster class, you know, from cleric to wizard, has 1 9th level slot, and that's all they get for the day. Unless you have a simulacrum that you make, and then they have a 9th level slot. But whatever. Or an absolute duplicate. Let's see. A 10 platinum piece focus gem, which is the center, and it doesn't say that it's used up. So first off, the sphere does not break or shatter until either dispelled or loses all of its HP. That asserts that a disintegrate is not able to get through it. So of any material, that's interesting. I think the any material is just to be used so that you can make whatever you want, right? You can make it glass, you can see through it, or you can make it some other material. Essentially, this is a beefed up Odaluk's resilient sphere, except this sphere has a finite amount of health instead of being able to be destroyed by disintegrates and all of that. The big issue I have with this is a 5-minute cast time and only lasting for 5 rounds. So 5 rounds is 30 seconds in rules as written Dungeons and Dragons. So to be spending 5 minutes casting something and then only get 30 seconds of duration, as a 9th level spell, I don't see that being used very often. So with this kind of spell, I would say casting time, probably an action. 9th level spells as bonus actions is super powerful. So I'm gonna relegate this to a bonus action casting time. Components, verbal and material. I like that, but I will bump the material components up in cost because this is only 1,000 gold points. By the time you get to level 17, which is when you get 9th level spells, regardless of your full caster class, you'll have more than 100 platinum if your DM is any kind. The sphere having 500 HP, that's interesting. I will rewrite this above, as the exact wording isn't totally in my head yet. The ranger area, I believe this should be, well, it's cast on the focus, so I would say ranger area will be self. Technically, this would assert that you could cast it somewhere else, but it also says nothing can pass through it. So I will clean up the wording of this a little bit and show how it can be written up here. I, again, want to maintain Flaming Druid's idea that it can be any material and the assertion that Disintegrate cannot break it. I will add things like it passing through the ethereal plane because it is 9th level, right? Planar travel shouldn't be able to get in the way of that, in my opinion, as planar travel is a 7th level magic plane shift. Does not break or shatter until either dispelled or loses all of its HP. So the fact that it can be dispelled, that's interesting. I think you would need a dispel magic of a certain level. But since it's 9th level, I'm not sure if you need to be able to dispel it. You know, thinking about some spells like True Polymorph, technically that could be dispelled, but this is a lot, right? And also, can spells pass through the sphere? If spells cannot pass through the sphere, then maybe you need to cast Dispel Magic on the gem, and you can't do so. So up here, I've homebrewed a little bit of a wrapper around this spell. I like it, and I would even consider putting Power Word Shield in my game. So let's do one more. Again, these are slightly longer videos than other videos of this type on different channels, but again, I want to really go deep dive and justify all of these decisions I'm making. So let's go EdayrCrimson by comes. 2nd level spell, that's interesting. This spell is best used by Immortals to enhance their abilities. Is this immortal people to enhance their abilities? I don't know. What they choose to summon and or enhance is usually up to the caster, but it only lasts about as long as the user can concentrate or until the player rolls a 1 or 2. It can be broken if the horn is broken and can't be used until the next dawn. Material components. A speck of dust ground from an animal's bone, somatic and verbal. Self, casting time 1 action, duration 1 hour. Concentration. Oh, and Absolute Shield is concentration. Okay, transmutation. I think the ideal with this spell is to augment abilities, to enhance abilities at 2nd level. Enhancement of abilities, there is already, funny story, there's already a 2nd level spell called Enhance Ability. So instead of fixing this, actually, I might just refer to Enhance Ability, because Enhance Ability is on all of these lists, I believe, and I also don't know what a horn is. In this case, I'm gonna pass, because I'm not quite sure. If anybody wants to comment down below and let me know what you think Cam's meant by this, I am happy to take another look at it, so let me know. Again, my fault for not understanding. If it needs more clarification, absolutely. I can take another look at that later on. I still want to do one more. So let's do Air Slash. This is a cantrip, an evocation cantrip with almost 400 views, -8 points again. 1 action, range 120 feet, only somatic components. That's interesting. Duration is instantaneous, evocation, attack save, that none. That's interesting. You form a pocket of vacuum or air and launch it at incredible speeds at a creature or object within range. On a hit, you can choose to push or pull the creature by 5 feet. So interesting. This is actually, I actually really like it. The only change that I would make ostensibly is this, no attack or save. I think this is just a spell attack, and I think it's covered inside the spell wording. On a hit, you can push. Interesting. Yeah. It also does not declare damage. So the big thing is this looks like it could have been 2 drafts and lost some wording and translation, but that's okay. This text says the spell's damage increases by 1d6 when you reach 4th level, 8th level, 12th, and 16th. So that's not the typical scaling. Typical scaling is 5, 11, 17, right? Is that right? Maybe, or 16? Shit. I'm losing all credibility by the minute. So I like this spell being 1d6. Well, no, actually. Okay. Here's what I'm gonna do with this spell. So I think spell attack is totally fine. And then on a hit, you can choose to push or pull the creature by 5 feet. So that is making either a vacuum or a gust of wind. So this spell is essentially purely somatic. You cast forward, and I would honestly even put a component, maybe a feather or some kind of small fan, which of course would be covered by your focus, your arcane or nature focus, right? Druid, sorcerer, wizard. Cast the spell, make an attack save with that slice of air or vacuum, like pulling them. 1d8 damage. And I would even say, let's make this force damage, right? As force just pushing this creature. And then push or pull 5 feet. So I'm okay with making it force. Force is the most powerful damage type in 5e. So usually you nerf a spell or ability that uses force damage just a little bit to make up for the fact that force damage is not resisted by most things. But only pushing or pulling 5 feet, I think that's totally fine. I like this spell a lot as a cantrip. Honestly, I don't think there's any issue making this cantrip verbal, somatic, and material, especially for cantrip. I think that's totally fine. So here is my updated version of this spell. I'm going to keep the ranger area at 120 feet. I think it's a cool way to affect people at a distance. It is a cool alternative to things like Eldritch Blast. Granted, Eldritch Blast is 1d10 and this is only 1d8, but because this is also force damage, right? And has an effect, it's basically giving you some warlockiness, like using one of the invocations that lets you pull creatures or push creatures away. So this is almost a bastardization of that, but I like it because it can be used on druids, sorcerers, or wizards. I would also add it to the bard list. So there's my redone air slash. I think it's cool. And LightningJay, Flaming Druid, KingBaxel, EdayrCrimson, I think you all have great ideas for homebrewed items. And for all of you watching, I think that this was a great first installment of this. I hope you enjoyed this video. It was just kind of me rambling and showing you some stuff on the screen, but I hope you enjoyed it. Again, I really love homebrewing, and I think that it's a way that people can affect their games and have some good say in the spells and items that people are given. Again, if you like this video, feel free to like and subscribe. We have so much D&D content on this channel, and we will continue to have D&D content on this channel. Also, we play D&D on our Twitch, so you can check that out. All of our links are in the descriptions. All the Starlight Company's Twitters are in the description. Lots of fun. Feel free to comment to let me know what you thought of my versions of these spells, and if you have better ideas for how these spells can be done, let me know. Also, if you have any homebrew spells that you want to run by me, you are more than welcome to join our Discord or our subreddits and make a spell. I will take a look at it personally and let you know what I think. So, all of that said, thank you all for watching. I very much appreciate it. I love the community that we are forming here with Starlight Company, and I love being able to share my perspectives on Dungeons & Dragons and tabletop role-playing in general. So, everyone, thank you for watching, and please have a wonderful Telltale day. Bye!